Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced, and welcome to another video. As we continue down our exploration of Apache Spark, for the next several videos, we're going to be using Nessie as a iceberg catalog, which requires a little bit of setup based on our current setup at the moment. But first, let's just talk about what Nessie is. So Nessie is going to act as our catalog. Nessie is an open source software built for this very purpose. Okay, so essentially what it would do is it would track our tables, like table A, table B, table C, and again, it would track sort of, what their current metadata file is. So v1.metadata.json. Let's say this one would be at like v4.metadata.json. This one's at, let's say, v8.metadata.json. So it tracks sort of what our current state of all of our tables are at. So basically, Nessie becomes sort of the arbiter of what is the current state of our tables. And the cool thing is that it makes all your tables. So basically, like, let's say here's your Data.Lake storage, where we store all the actual iceberg tables and iceberg metadata. Essentially, Nessie would be aware of sort of the table metadata on the storage and know exactly which is like the latest metadata. And then tools like Spark that want to write iceberg tables can then do so through Nessie. And then tools like Dremio can then read those tables. But Nessie is a little extra special because it has built-in Git-like functionalities. So you can actually create branching paths of changes to your, not one table, but to the entire catalog. Okay, which is really cool. And we'll explore a lot of those patterns, but we need to get it all set up so we can actually do this. And the thing is, we're going to be using Minio as our storage because we need some sort of object storage that's also portable between sort of Spark and Dremio. So we're going to use Minio. So we need to get it all set up. So first things first, I'm going to open up Docker desktop. So I already stopped my Spark container, but basically look for your Spark container that you started already, and you want to click the trash can and trash it because we're not going to need it as is anymore. Now, if you don't already have the Minio image, again, search for the Minio image. Okay, so that's going to be, I think, yeah, this one. You're going to pull it, and then you're going to also want the Nessie image. Okay, which is going to be this right here. I already have Minio and Nessie running, but just to kind of walk you through what you would do is first you would go create a new Nessie image, and you would just make sure you put in the port. So it'd be like 19.120, 80.80, 8443 to expose all the right ports. Make sure you give it a name. And there should be no need for volumes or environmental variables for this particular container. Then you'd want to start a Minio container, which you would just click here, play on the Minio image, give it a name. We'll say Minio, connect the ports, 9001. In this case, you do want some environmental variables. It would be root user. Okay. What do you think about that? I'll be able to just double check for my existing Minio container. So things like root user and root user password. So let's see here, environmental variables, root. Yeah, here we go. Minio root user, Minio root password. Okay. And actually, while we're at that, we might as well also set. So yeah, this is an open container, so I can actually inspect it. I'll kind of go over that again in a second. But essentially, I want these four things here. So region and region name. I'll set the US East 1. So again, I would create a new Minio image, set the ports, and then it would be like Minio root user, and I usually put admin. Then we would get another one for Minio root password, which would be password. Okay, then I want Minio region, and that would just be US East 1. It could be any AWS region you want. And Minio region name. And that would be US East 1. Okay, and then you'd be good to go. So that'd be for the Minio container. And then for the Nessie, we did the Nessie container, and then we would have to reopen the Spark container, which would be, again, my custom Spark container over here. You'd just restart that. Again, in your settings, you would just bind it to 8888, okay, which I need to do. So again, I'm going to call this Spark. And we do need several environmental variables. Okay, we're going to need AWS region set to US East 1. That's probably going to be the most important thing. Okay. AWS region name to US East 1. Okay, then we're also going to need your AWS information, but it wouldn't really be your AWS information because we're using Minio, so it's just your Minio root username and password, so admin and password. Okay, but that needs to be done through the following environmental variables, which is going to be AWS access key ID and AWS secret access key. And we might as well also do AWS default region. Okay, while we're at it. Okay, and again, this is part of a blog post that is linked to in the repo that's in the video description. This is sort of the make a data lake house on your laptop blog post that I wrote a while back. Okay, so let me go back to Docker here. So again, AWS access key ID. AWS access key ID, which would be, in this case, admin. And then it is AWS secret access key. Okay. Cool, which will be password. And again, you have to define this now. You can't define it later. So if you miss any of these, you have to restart the container and set these. Because there's no way to really establish them afterwards because they have to exist when the Spark server starts. So while I can go back and like get into a bash environment into my container and define some environmental variables, since the Spark container had already started, it would not have these available to it. So just to kind of understand the deal here. Okay, we did that. Okay, now this endpoint, this has to be the IP address of your Minio server, which I didn't get ahead of time. We should be able to exist without that. And warehouse, we should be able to exist without that. And we should be able to exist without this. Okay, really, it's just the AWS regions. Really, the only thing that is given is the... Like, as long as you have these four, you should be good to go. Okay, and this should actually be AWS default region. So if you have those four variables, we should be good to go. Then you hit run. Okay, and now basically the way things should look like, and again, make sure that you grab that URL so you can get to it and open it up in the browser. Okay, cool. And again, I'm going to just create a new folder called iceberg. Rename it to iceberg lake housing. Like we did before. That's what we'll work out of. And yeah, we can try this out. Okay. So if I go over here to iceberg lake housing, and then we're going to create a new Python notebook. Let me go get the code. And again, you can get that from the repo that's linked in the video description. We'll walk through it. There's a couple of changes we'll want to make. Okay, so let's walk through the top. So again, we're going to import PySpark, Spark session. OS is going to allow us to access those environmental variables. Okay. So in this case, basically what we would want to do to access those environmental variables is we would do os.get or .env .get. Or actually, I think it's get env. And then we would say, hey, I want to get AWS secret key. And we would do the same thing for AWS access key. Access key. Actually, is that the right name for these? Yeah, it's access key ID and secret access key. So let me make sure I got those right. Okay. So this is really access key ID. And this is a secret access key. Are the two variables there? And the endpoint, so again, the AWS S3 endpoint has to be the one for Minio. So I have to go back to Docker, look up my Minio container. So here's my Minio container. And then when I want to click on inspect right here, click on networks. And then from there, I can find its IP address right here. So I just want to make sure that it's that IP address. So then I go here and yeah, I know I got that fine. Now the Nessie URL has to be the Nessie IP address, which should be fine because I did that earlier. Okay. But again, you would do the same thing for the Nessie container. So I would go back to containers. I would look up Nessie, click on inspect, click on networks, and then you can find the IP address right down here. Okay, good to go. Okay, so now let's see here. Back to our notebook. So that should be all the right values. Now we need to point it to the warehouse has to be a bucket in our Minio. So you want to make sure that I made a bucket named test. Actually, I'm going to create a different bucket. So I'm going to head back to Minio. So again, that should be on localhost 9001 if you bound the ports. And I'm going to create a bucket called warehouse. Okay, I'm going to create a bucket called warehouse. Create bucket. Awesome. And I'm going to go over here and we just basically have to do that. Warehouse. So essentially that's where it's going to save the actual Parquet files and Iceberg metadata. That's what the warehouse property does. So now basically here what we have is just our configurations like an Iceberg table, but we have to download some extra libraries because we need to download the libraries for Nessie. Okay, there's actually a few different libraries we need to download. So if I scroll here on the packages line, you'll see that we have the jar for Nessie being downloaded. Then we have some jars for AWS to be able to work with AWS type file storage. Okay, then we're going to have our extensions, which also include Project Nessie extensions because that has some custom SQL to add. And then we're configuring a catalog, and our custom catalog name is Nessie. And you can see here we configure it to use the Iceberg Spark catalog class. We point the URI to the Nessie server. Now the ref is like the default branch. So again, Nessie has like Git-like semantics. So you could actually start and have a default branch that's not the main branch. Okay, authentication type, none, because it's just basically starting it off the Docker container without any kind of customization. So I'm not using any kind of authentication, but there are like you can do OAuth and other things with Nessie. Okay, changing the catalog implementation to the custom Nessie catalog implementation. I'm setting the endpoint to where, so this is what I'm doing here is saying, hey, where to go find the files. So I'm saying, hey, don't make a call to S3 normally, like a normal S3 URL. Use this custom S3 URL, which is going to point to my Minio server, which is this right here. Okay. Then the warehouse, it says, hey, which folder, which bucket I want to save data to. And then here we're saying, hey, we want to use the S3 file input output. So that way it's built to write to S3, not to a normal file system, to object storage. Then here we're stating, actually technically I don't even think you really need these three pieces, but I put them there just in case. Okay, and we're just going to run a very basic setup. So if we can create this table successfully, or we can query this table successfully, then we're in good shape. Okay, so, and I'm going to just change the name to test, the table to test names. So it's a test. Okay. So now if I run this, let's see how it goes. Okay, we're going to start seeing it. So right now it's going to start downloading all the jars that were in our settings. Okay, and good. Hoping for the best, making sure that it got that all those environmental variables just fine. We'll find out in a moment. I will pause because this may take a second. Okay, so Spark is running. So now it is going to start running. Okay, it created the table successfully. Good. And that looks like that looks good too. And yeah, okay, good. So we're up and running. We are creating tables in Nessie. Okay, so now what I should be able to do is I should be able to head over to the menu, go into that warehouse bucket. Actually, over here in the object browser, go to warehouse. And there it is. There's the test names table. Perfect. Okay, good. So that means that is working. So now in the next video, what we'll do is we'll actually do an end-to-end, use Spark to ingest data into Nessie and then load that data into Dremio. So I'll see you in that video. So I'll see you there.